What is your name?
Joseph R. Kaylor.
Where were you born?
In a little community 5 miles south of Marion called Jacktown, across the double railroad tracks.
When were you born?
January 30th, 1928.
Tell me about your family.
I'm a family of 10. I'm the middle one, and I'm the oldest one still living.
Can you tell me a little bit about Glenwood High School?
Well, Glenwood High School, when I went, was 11 grades. And in 1946, I was drafted into the Army out of high school. There was 8 of us that went that day. The reason for it was Germany had surrendered, and they thought they was going to have to invade Japan, and they was drafting everybody that came 18. So halfway through they only had the 11th grade in school back in those days. They didn't have the 12th grade. So halfway through it, I was drafted. And so I was gone for about a year. When President Truman dropped a bomb, anybody that's drafted could get out. So I only had to serve about a year. I'll tell you about my Army service. It's a true story. I was stationed in Larry Field, Colorado. And at that time, I was studying to be an aerial photographer. I took photography, take pictures, still pictures. It'd tell you to take 8 pictures, but the 7th one had to take where they tell you to take it, but the 8th one you could take it. And Earl Webb and his daddy was out there, and he took all the mechanics, and he'd make me take him to school in a boat or something with the 8th one anyway. So Grandpa died, and I got an air transport command flight from Denver, Colorado to Robbins Field in Georgia, and I hitchhiked the west way. And back then, it was the Army Air Corps. It wasn't like the Air Corps today. It was the Army Air Corps. And you only had to wear a cap like that unless you was taking something, but I could wear one being a photographer like that. Well, my friends took me to, actually the friend took me back to Fort Bragg, our field down there, and I had a priority on AT ship back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, free. Well, I was out there looking around like this, and a guy from Marion there I knew, he was the MP down there. He come around and said, "So what you doing that hat on all like that?" And I looked at it, and he said, "Hey," my nickname was Babe. They called me Babe. He said, "Babe, what are you doing down here?" I said, "Well, my flight's fixed and leaving a little bit. I'm Army." He says, "Well, come get in with me." He was the MP. He says, "I'll ride you around a little bit." Like a fool, I got in with him. And he took me over to put me over to Fayetteville, and they had a fight over there. The Army guys did. And dog, if he didn't get out there, when I got back, the plane that I had priority on was leaving the ground. And there I was, I had about $7 in my pocket, 18-year-old, and didn't know what to do. So I went back in there to operation and told them. They said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Your plane's gone." I said, "Ain't nothing I can do." I said, "I don't know what to do." He said, the guy said, "Well, I'll tell you what I'll do." So he said, "We got a flight going to Bowen Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. In about an hour, I'll put you on that." And says, "You can probably get a flight going west out of there better than you can here down there at that field." And I said, "Okay." Put me on there, got to Washington about dark. Have you ever been to Washington, flying over Washington? It's just like that to the cap to the streets are, isn't it? Beautiful place. Well, got in there, and this master sergeant, he's a crew chief, fixed that plane up. I was standing out there looking like that, and I told him what I was doing. He says, "We're going that way." This was the 20th of December. And he took me back in there to operations and said, "I want this guy on this plane." That guy said, he ain't going. Says, "If you got room for that plane," says, "the emergency furlough will go." So I didn't know what to do. He took me back out there, and tarmac was that way. It's where all the planes was. He gave me a number. Said, "That's the plane we're on." Said, "You go out there and sit in the back of the plane and sit there." Said, "I'll take care of you." So like a fool, I went out on that tarmac where they wasn't supposed to be on there. Here come MP, says, "What the hell are you doing? You crazy so-and-so out here on this tarmac?" I said, "My plane's leaving." Give him that number. And he said, "Get in." He took me in that Jeep, drove me right up to that airplane. I got in the plane, and it was a C-47. C-47 back in they trained our paratroopers. It had 2 seats right down the middle. It sat there, and it looked like a restroom behind. He sat at the door at the back, and he told me to go back there and sit. So I went back there, and I sat there, and about 35, 40 minutes, our inmates coming, and all it was, there was a colonel, I never forget his name, it was D.I.C., Dice, and 3 lieutenants, and I think there's 2 captains, and they were using that plane to go home for Christmas. And that's the reason they didn't want nobody else on there. That's all it was. Anyhow, when it took out, Master Sergeant, crew chief, he said, "Hey, you in there?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Come on out." I come on out, sat down, but I didn't say nothing. I sat there, coming across the mountain this way, the heat went off of back there. And the Colonel Dice was a pilot, and he had a major as a lieutenant, he's a co-pilot. And them other officers, they go up there and warm between the two. Well, I just sat there, and they said, "You get on up there and warm." They made me, so I go up there and warm. And they stopped in Wichita, Kansas. That was a big base, the refuel of that C-47. And it was about 6 o'clock in the morning. And he had ordered breakfast for that group. And well, I got so cold before getting there, this captain gave me that, you know how they had them weather jackets, that captain, he gave me one of them weather jackets to put on so I wouldn't get cold. So when the plane landed and they were going to eat, I just sat there. I wasn't about to go. I didn't say nothing. And that colonel was done, says, "Come on, soldier." I said, "Let me take this jacket off." He said, "Come on, they won't know the difference." And of course, it wasn't but 2 KP's work, you know, it was. So I stayed behind. He went first, and I went last. And I helped my plate over, and they filled it up. And I got back first, mirrored the chuck it, and one of them said, "That's the youngest I ever seen to be a captain." And I told them about it, and I got in the plane. They said, "You ought to turn around and shoot them out." But I went on Cheyenne, got off, and made them back.
So I heard you play basketball. How was that?
Well, and then back in those days, Glenwood didn't have a gym. We had it on the dirt court outside, and we won the county tournament. They didn't have county tournaments like they did now. They had gold medal tournaments, and we won. They had the gold medal tournament in Canton, North Carolina, and one in Valdez, and we won the gold medal tournament. But that was after I came back out of the service.
How many teams played in the tournaments?
Oh, everyone in western North Carolina back in those days. The state didn't control it like they do today.
Okay.
It's mostly invitation tournaments.
So what position did you play in basketball?
Forward.
Forward. What's the most points you ever scored in a game?
Well, you didn't have them high scores like you did now. I had scored 30 points, 35 in the game back then. Like I say, I was a pretty good basketball player. And Mr. Roach was principal at Pleasant Garden School. And we had beat Pleasant Garden a time or two, because me and another of my friends was good ball, L.D. Real. He'd been in the Navy. We'd come back and went to school. Well, he said that veterans shouldn't go to high school, and if you was 21 on January the 1st, you shouldn't be allowed to play with high school kids. That was Wiggins, the principal, and he got that passed through the county commissioners. So that means Board of Education. So about a week or 2 after he got it passed, we was playing Pleasant Garden out there. So I went there, and he come to me and says, "Kaylor, you're not playing." And Walt Williams was a personnel manager at that time of Clearwater. And Walt was about 6'4", 220 pounds, and he told Williams to just sit down, said he's going to play. Well, he made a mistake was, you had to be 21 by January the 1st. You couldn't play a veteran. I wasn't 21 to January the 30th, so I got to play. And they threw LD off. LD didn't get to play the boys' head for that. So he missed it. So he come back the next 2 weeks, Wiggins did, and tried to get the principals and all to change it so I couldn't play. And they told him, said, "We don't want to hear no more from you." Says, "We're not making no policies for Kaylor." Says, we shouldn't have done it in the first place. Says, "You made a mistake." Said, "Don't even come back no more." So I played out the year. at Glenwood High School, Mr. Howell, our principal, set up a veteran school for veterans to come back after all this happened, that veterans couldn't go during the day. He set up a night school, and I guess there probably 400 graduated from Glenwood veterans after the war.
How did you meet your wife?
Well, when I went to service, I didn't even know her hardly. So I was gone. I should have finished high school in 1946. So I was in service, I left half a year in school when they got me in January. So I was gone for a year and a half. So when I came back, I went back to Glenwood High School and finished high school in 1948. By that time, she had grown up, and she was the prettiest girl in Glenwood, so I had to have her.
How long have you been married to her?
On July the 10th, this past year, I've been married 66 years.
Wow, that's a long time. Tell me about your first job you had.
Picking blackberries. Back when I was growing up, times was hard. It was right during the Depression and after that. And during school, during the summer, I picked berries, 20 cents a gallon, and carried them from Jacktown, knocked on the doors in Marion and sold them. That's how I bought my clothes.
How much do you say you make off a gallon?
Well, I could pick 2 gallons in the morning and carry them up the railroad and knock on the doors, and to get 25 cents a gallon for them. So I'd get enough to get an ice cream cone, and I saved the rest to buy my clothes. And I remember one particular family, I did it for 2 or 3 years, not just one summer. And I remember one particular family was Miss J.D. Blanton. They owned all the stores here in town, but they knew me so much I had customers that I'd get berries from. And I remember her very well. At the end of the season, she always wanted 2 gallons of green ones. I never could understand, but she gave me a nickel more a gallon to pick them.
Tell me about jobs you had.
I cut wood at 50 cents a day, pulpwood on Saturday for John Duncan, 50 cents. And I also worked at Gene Holland's store where he turned into Jacktown.
You was working for the Buick and Chevrolet dealership after high school. How was that?
Well, when my brother was the body man for Blue Motor Company, the dealership on East Court Street. And at that time, you beat the fenders out. You didn't buy a fender and put it on. So I hung around there a lot. So Mr. Ballou knew me, and he told me, says, Joe, when you finish high school, I'm going to give you a job. So I met him uptown on a Friday night beside the James Hotel here in Marion. They had a men's clothing store called Rab and Hitchcock. And I saw him in there, and once in a while he'd take a drink. And he said, Joe, when you graduate? I said, I graduate tonight. He says, you be at my place Monday morning, I'll give you a job. He did. He gave me a job as a parts man with his son in the parts room down there. And he reached over on the counter and gave me a tie for a graduation present there in Rab and Hitchcock. I never have forgotten it.
So, owning several gas stations, what gas stations did you own?
Well, I quit the Blue Motor Company and bought a service station out in Burnsville, North Carolina. And I stayed over there, and I was doing well, making good money at it. I got involved with playing basketball over for the Burnsville American Legion. And the coach was the mayor of Burnsville. And he gave me all the business for the electric company, and I was making good money. And my wife, our first child was born, and at that time they ran a bus from Burnsville to Marion every day, 5 days a week down NC 80. And 3 days a week she'd catch the bus and come to Marion. It stayed 3 hours. Her mother'd come pick her up and take her down for 3 hours, and she'd ride the bus back that night. So I just couldn't put her through that. So after about 6 or 7 months, I sold out and came back. And I played basketball at that time. There's Burnsville American Legion at Anchor and Beacon and Sales Bickmore Bleachers and Clearwater. And Clearwater at that years was strong. They worked a lot of people. And the coach of that team was Dick Crowder, and he was personnel director. And I played ball for Vernon Muscovy, so when he found out I come back to Marion, he called me up and gave me a job at Clearwater to play basketball. Put all the basketball players in the room about the size of this. And when the season was over, I went to work for Horace Lance at the SO station down on East Court Street.
You worked for Old Fort Manufacturing, and you also
It was called Clearwater Manufacturing back then.
Okay.
But it was a large company. I mean, they worked it full time.
Okay. What about
It's still up there too.
What about the American Thread?
Well, when I was working at Horace Lance on East Court Street, they just built the American Thread in 1950 and 52, and it was going good. It'd been there about 2 or 3 years, and the guy was named Dean Derry was over the shipping department, and he traded some down there at the store. So he told me one day, said, Joe said, why don't you come and work for me up at the American Thread? So I went up there, and they gave me a job the next morning, and I'm not for sure, but I think I made about $1.10 an hour loading trucks up there. So I worked my way up several years to a foreman. And then I worked as a general foreman, and then I was over all 3 shifts. And total, I worked 37 years at American Thread. And the company bought a plant, a Standard Cooch, a Thatcher company in Memphis, Tennessee, and they took the manager over to the department to manage that place over there. And Sevier had industrial thread that sells threads for clothes, and they also had what they call CP, consumer product. They made thread and stuff for women sewing with. And each one, I worked for the industrial department. But during the time they combined them both, and it was about 100-some people in both departments. And there was one, when they moved him over there, they asked me if I wanted the job as general manager of the distribution. And I didn't think I could handle it because I hadn't had college education. And they said, well, we want you to have it. And the guy that was assistant manager came over here from Bristol. He thought he would get the job. Well, the guy at that time, the vice president came from New York. The headquarters was 260 West Broadway, New York, for American Thread Company. He come down there and said, Joe, we want you to take this. And I said, well, I don't know where I could handle it or not. I said, could I take it for 30 days or 90 days? And if I can't handle it, I'll quit. And he said, Joe, if you don't want it today, I'll give it to somebody else. I said, we want you to take it, and we believe you can take it because we checked on you. And said, the man that left said, you done the job anyway before you left. We had had large people. We had an office up front of Merck. They had 50,000 square foot warehouse over all that. And we had, I guess I had at one time 8 or 10 ladies that billed sometimes $50,000 a day. And it was a big job. I mean, I took it, did well, and I couldn't believe it, the money they gave me. Of course, I was making good money as general foreman. I'd worked up to general foreman over all 3 shifts, and I had assistant foremen under me when I asked me to take it. So I took it and did well. I got a raise every year I was there. I took it, and I made big money at that time. And I think I had the total of about, I didn't work, the 37 years wasn't continuous working. That's when I'm on the service stations. After so many years, I quit. And they built a new Gulf station on Relford Road where on the left down there. And the boy asked me to take it, and I took it. I quit my job. At that time, I was a foreman, and I quit it. And I'd worked there, and I'd bought a station down there, and I bought John Sullivan out on Main Street beside the SO station. I owned 2 stations there at one time. And I was greasing a car one day, and the personnel manager and the manager that was over it all from Bristol came over here, and Mr. Poor always called me the wheel. I don't know why, and that's what I called him. And he says, well, we want you to come back to work at American Thread. And I said, well, I'm making good money. I do. They traded with me. They had trucks at that time, and they traded, run it. I'd fill up some of them big trucks, 50 gallons at a time, gas. They traded with American Thread did with me. And I said, I'm doing well here. I said, we want you to come back. I said, what would you come back for? And I thought to myself, well, I don't want to go. And I said, I'll come back for $4 an hour more. I said, back in those days, $4 raise was a lot of money. So they said, okay. He said, we'll let you know. About 30, 45 minutes, they called me back. I was working there at the service station. They said, Joe said, Will, he called me, Will said, we expect you up here in 2 weeks. I said, I can't come up there. And Mr. Ford said, Joe said, aren't you good as your word? I said, yeah. He said, I expect you here in 2 weeks. So I went back. So during that time, I'd worked the state till I retired.
Tell me about refereeing.
Well, like I said, I was not bragging, but I was a pretty good basketball player. I had some offers when I finished in '48 to play basketball. When I refereed for 30 years, college and high school ball, and some days I'd referee 2-3 nights a week, and back in those, and I always gave my money to my wife, and that's what we spent Christmas with. What I made a referee, and I had when my kids had a good Christmas, and I enjoyed refereeing. I was noted for a strict referee. I didn't cater to the coaches or the kids either. I just done the job and left. A lot of coaches that go around and talk to the coach and tell the players, you made a good shot. I never did do that. I followed the rules. And I had some experience I remembered. I was calling the University of North Carolina at Asheville and Marshall College, and the ball went up in the stands, and the player from Marshall punched me and said, hey, Rev, look, and the college had a bulldog as the mascot. You've seen it, the mascot. We looked down, and that old bulldog had snapped him right to our back of his heel, and blood was running down his titty shoe. It come down. So I injected the dog, and I made the head of Asheville Sports. That was one of the times I did. I had two experiences. I had 3 experiences playing ball. I remember refereeing for 30 years, and one of them was at Asheville High School. The Afro-American was a coach. I'd call for him at Hunter Huss, Sweepy Floyd. You remember him, don't you? In Washburn, at Ashbrook, I called for all them. And Burleson, you remember that crowd, don't you? About your age. They older than you now, though. Anyway, I'd call for that, and it had I called out Asheville Association, and they called me up one day and said, Joe, I want you to go down to Saluda. You know where Saluda is, down the mountain. They was playing Tryon, and the girls' game went fine. Nothing happened. And they had a guy by the name of Fisher, one of the best ball players in the state. And to make a long story short, he was in a car wreck. He done got a full scholarship at Carolina. I mean, he was about the size of you in high school. Nice looking man. And he had wrecked. I'd kept up with him. And he lost about 2 years, but he finally finished at Western Carolina playing some ball. But he was sorry. Anyway, the girls' game went fine. The boys' game, I think, was 30-10 at halftime. And here come a boy from, I know their name, he lived out on Airport Road, the referee lived. They didn't have no gym. He sit on outside down there at Saluda. Did you play basketball? Did you ever play Saluda down there? And they didn't have no place for the referees to sit. You just sit on the bench like that. Here come 2 old jokers across the field like that, and one of them had a knife strung on him here, and the other had a whiskey bottle in his pocket, you know. And I had more hair than I got now. And he said to me, Saluda's going to win this ball game. I said, well, sir, I don't care who wins it. I just call what I see. Oh, it says, we're not calling saying you're crooked. We're saying that telling you that Schluter's going to win this ball game or I'll carry you out of here. That was one time I got scared. And of course, there they sat, big old floor, and I thought, man. And I looked up, and it was halftime. And I went and told the principal, I said, we've been threatened here. I said, just where the books I signed, I'll forfeit this game. I had the authority to do it. I was the head referee. I said, I just forfeit this game and go home. Oh, he said, please don't do that for us. He says, we're already on probation. So I said, well, you have to get some law enforcement over here, in here. He said, okay. And he went out there and saluted, and they got a man about as old as I am now, I believe, come in there, and his uniform was slicker than this. And I told him, I said, all due respect, sir, you won't do, because I knew he couldn't stop my baby boy from coming. I said, I'm ready to go. They said, if you'll start the game, we'll call the sheriff. And he was real respected in Polk County. I held the game up about 5 minutes. He come in. I started the second half, and it wasn't 2 minutes. One of them saluted trying to hit, boys hit that, one went that way and one went that way. At that time, the rule was a double foul. You jump the ball, you don't shoot. So I took the ball up to shoot. Here come one of them jokers that had the knife across the floor. And I looked at him, and they had steps far from that door down there. And I was going to run. I wasn't going to let him cut me. And about the time he got halfway to me, that boy, I was jumping the ball with, said, Daddy, said, sit down over there. I said, this man knows what he's doing. Said, sit down, Daddy. He just turned around and sat back down and finished the game. Nobody said a word. It was his son. His son, he meant for his son to shoot that foul. But I had a lot of chances like that. I was calling high school game, and I told him I made the paper, ice for paper twice. I was calling the high school game, and I started the game out with 5 technical fouls in Asheville High School. Man, I thought they was going to carry me out of there. That's back when the Afro-Americans and whites was pretty strong about each other, you know. And I started the game with 5 technical fouls, and man, they hollered, and so what happened, I always checked the book. Like I say, I was sure a referee. You're supposed to check the book and set the numbers right, and I did. When I started to start the game, I looked for Asheville, and the number was what was on the book. So I stopped and looked again, and all 5 of them was different. So I called 5 different fouls. That was the rule. I had no choice. I had to call it, because that's the rule. It had to be the same number in the book. You know that from playing ball. So I started out with 5 technical fouls, and I told it. And he went up, he was playing Freedom. That's when Freedom was in with Marion and Asheville, you know. And the guy went up there and hit 3 out of 5 fouls. And I told the coach, I said, Coach, now them other 5 players you got numbers, I said, you better change them numbers. If you put one of them in, I'll have to call nothing, which I was nice. I told him what was what, but first time I had no choice. So I told him that. And anyway, he took the microphone and said, you fellas sit down. Said it's my fault. It says it's not his fault. Said he forced the rule, and I appreciate what he done. What had happened, UPS brought 10 new uniforms in there about 5 minutes before the game started, and all those boys had to have them new uniforms on. He forgot to change the book. So I made the headlines. Referees started 5 taking, and Freedom beat them 2 points. Beat Asheville High, 2 points.
You served on the first Glenwood School Board, and then served on the county school board.
Well, now, this is all after the Army days now. Mm-hmm. And they said I was the first Republican ever appointed to a district school board. Back in those days, if you wasn't a Democrat, you couldn't even get a job teaching. I mean, everybody tell you in the county here, if you got a job teaching this county back in the 40s, you had to register Democrat to get a job in this county. And they said I was the first Republican ever appointed to a district board. At that time, the superintendent had come in to the principal's office and asked him to step outside, and and then if the local board could hire the principal, and then they'd call the principal back in, the superintendent would, and he'd recommend the teachers and even hire the bus drivers and people in the lunchroom. And then after a few years, it was changed, to the big board, and they did away with that. Through the years, they did away with that district committee. Now they still have the committees at these elementary schools, but they don't have advisory power. They don't have no power. It's just advisory.
Tell me about the McDowell Head Start program.
I was elected to the school board in 1978. After I was elected, about the second week or two, I guess it was, Miss Grindstaff asked me to come up to Old Fort. That's Dr. Grindstaff's mother. And she was head of the Head Start. And she had a room, just one room, from that chair to this, and she was head of the Head Start. Didn't have no room at all. And they had had agricultural program at each element at high school. It was high schools then. And they did away with agriculture programs in the county, and they had this whole big room up there at Old Fort. He was at Old Fort. And I asked, why didn't you use that? Well, the administration at that time had let the Army Reserve use it for their sakes. And there she sat doing nothing. So I came back. Now, what I'm telling you, I had support of the board. Anyway, I come back and got put forward the board. So we told them for the Army Reserve to hunt them a place, and we give it to the Head Start. And so the Army Reserve came under where the community building is, that gym down there. That's where the Army Reserve came when they left Old Fort, and Miss Big got all that. And today, the Head Start is noted for one of the best in the state.
You helped McDowell County Schools with funding. How did you do that?
Well, you can see on the board up there. In 1988, I was elected. I served as chairman 16 years. Out of my 24 years, I served 16 years as chairman for the school board. And if you had a leak at one of the schools, you had to beg to get the money to even stop the leak. So I went before the commissions in 1988 as chairman. They had 4 Democrats and 1 Republican on it. They had Haskell Davis. Some even know Haskell. He's the only Republican on the board. And Jack Wood was chairman that works for the city now. He was chairman of the county commission. And J.T. Real and Spaulding and Bob Love. Bob Love worked for the county. They was that. So I spoke to him and got it. And it fooled me. I got a unanimous vote to get the half-cent sales tax. I told him if he could get the half-cent sales tax, we'd never come back to ask them for no money for nothing. He had to beg money. And they agreed, and the McDowell County Building Fund was formed then. And Jack Wood signed it as chairman of the county commission, and I signed it as chairman of the school board. And young Bob Hunter was a lawyer. He's a judge now. He drew up the plans. And the place is still in effect today, you know that. And in every school, while I was chairman, and I'm not speaking just as chairman, I had the support of the board most of the time. We built $53 or $4 million worth of schools without any property tax. But we had a lady that, Miss Buchanan, got us a lot of grants. She worked, y'all probably don't know her, but she's young, but her husband was strong with building the Y, helped over the Y, and she got some grants. She worked real good. But Dr. David Ricketts was the principal or superintendent. I worked for, we had 5 superintendents while I served on the board.
How did McDowell County get to early college?
Well, then we went to a lot of conventions, but last year the school board hadn't went to no conventions, but we went somewhere every year. I was in Orlando, Florida at convention, and Canada always, this is a national convention, and Canada always came. But you needed to attend classes to go there because they had 25 or 30 different classes you could go to from if you wanted to study something about finances or chairmanship. They had a class for everything there. You looked over the big program. So I looked over the program, and they had a program there for Bill Gates' wife about early college. And the only reason I went to it she either went to Chapel Hill or Duke. Bill Gates' wife did. And I forget now which one it was. But that's the only reason I went to this class. And I sat in the class, and she talked about the early college students, early college. And Bill Gates is the one that started early college, not just in McDowell County, but nationwide. That was one of his, where he's putting his money. So I listened to that, and I got all the material that she passed out about it, and I brought it back to Dr. Ricketts, and he took it from there. He and Miss Brown down at McDowell Tech, they worked hours on it, so I give them credit for all of it. But the material, when I brought it back, Ricketts took it over. Dr. Ricketts was due the credit for starting early college along with Miss Brown.
Tell me about other ways you helped our community.
When I went off the board, of school board, they appointed me to McDowell Tech board. At that time, it still is the way. The county commissioners points one, the governor's points one, and the board of education points one. But during the years, the legislature put it that a school board member could not be a member of McDowell Tech, and so when my term was out, where the McDowell Tech, where the school board appointed me, the county commissioner appointed me. So I've been appointed ever since by the county commissioner. Just a couple months ago, I was appointed again. So when I serve this term, I've served 24 years there, and I've served every position down there, from the chairman of the committee to every committee down there.
Tell me about your work with the State Transportation Board.
Like I say, I've been a politician for a long time, too. I was Host Hauser's campaign manager. So when he got elected, I've got appointed to the State Board of Transportation for the whole state. And that's when the money, the $20,400,000 was appropriated when I was on it to build a bypass. I held the first two public hearings in the courthouse here for the bypass, but the state wanted to put the bypass where it starts down there now and cross by Quinцeville and come out at Tom's Creek. That's what the state recommended. But as politics goes, when Hosehauser went off, Hunt got in, and John Gilkey got the place on the board. And so he changed it, used the same money and changed it to the Murray bypass as it is today.
Tell me about your political work.
Like I say, back in the early days, there was no Republican Party. This county was strong Democrat. Like I said, you had to be a Democrat to do anything. So I came to town. My wife sent me to town to get a loaf of bread. At that time, we had grocery stores on Main Street. At West Henderson, all was grocery stores. There's about 4 grocery stores in town, hardware stores and everything. This little town was busy. So I was coming down the street where Belks was, and Max Poore, he was having a Republican convention at the courthouse, and he hard across the street and said, "Hey, Will, come over here." I didn't know where he was going, so I went over there because the personnel manager, American Thread. They elected me chairman of the party. 1970. And there were about 7 people there, or 8. And I said, "Man, I didn't come over here for that." And Mr. Chambers, y'all don't know him, but he's a millionaire back then. And he was there. And I said, "Is there money in the party?" There wasn't nothing in the party. But he did tell me, said, "Joe, if you'll take it, I'll see that you get the money you need." So I took it. And now we're a majority party in this county, big majority. And I think every election's Republican now, but it was different. And that's how I got started out. And then when I got appointed to the Board of Transportation, I had to give up the chairmanship, and Gilbert Hollyfield took it over then.
Tell me about the dental bus.
Gillespie, when he got elected, 2 years ago, this election, the governor gave him a job, so he gave it up, and had to be a Republican to get his job. So the Republican Party appointed Josh to fill his 2 years term, and that made it a 2-year term open for the county commissioner. So the party asked me to take it. They advertised it about 10 days, but someone provided for it. It had never been to a meeting or nothing. They come to my house and asked me if I'd take it. So They called me back the next day, said, "You're the new county commissioner." So I'm just serving the 2 years out for Josh. So they appointed me to represent McDowell on the county health department. And the first meeting I went to, they kept going over thousands of dollars they made on dental. And I thought, well, why is McDowell not getting that? It was Polk and Rufford got it all for their kids and some grown up. And I held up my hand. I said, "How about McDowell? Aren't we in this organization?" And they looked at me. Anyhow, I kept after it. In fact, Jimmy Hines told the county commissioner, said, sitting right here, we had him in here, he said, "Joe kept on that so long." Said we did something. So we got the bus and gave $100,000 for the bus. Without any, it made that much on the dental, and that we could pay cash for that bus. So it's starting. So I figured that's one of the best deals I made as county commissioner. But I never could understand why it went on for years that the county never got nothing. I mean, Medicaid what paid most of the kids, and it was thousands of dollars every month that they got.
Tell us about Betty.
Well, I like to say my wife was a big help to me. She never took her job. She raised our got 5 children. She raised them, stayed home and worked hard, and she's made me what I was. She stayed there and helped me. And all my kids, 4 of them got college degrees and some master's degrees. And my son, he said college wasn't for him. He was over at Western and went and got him, and he joined the Army and retired as a Master Sergeant in the 82nd Airborne. He jumped in those 2 places, Panama, Philippines, down in there in the Army, and retired after 25 years as a Master Sergeant in the 82nd Airborne. My other 4 kids finished college, got a master's degree. My young son's just retired as a highway patrolman.
If you have advice to give to the youth today, what would that be?
Just do what's right. Just do what is right. I always try to do what was right.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.